Welcome to table for 92, element number 86, radon. It's number 86 because it has exactly 86 protons within its nucleus. So for radon, I'm cooking up some Jersey pork roll. It's the best breakfast sandwich in the world. And I will finally finish the debate on whether it is called Taylor ham or pork roll. Spoiler alert, it's pork roll. People that say Taylor ham are wrong. Now, the reason I'm cooking up New Jersey's, unofficial, I guess, breakfast sandwich is that the phenomenon of radon poisoning in New Jersey was thought to be the absolute worst in the entirety of the United States. 2 miles away from where I am right now, it was the first place to successfully fight radon and win. And also, yeah, you shouldn't cook with radon, it will kill you. Plus, I don't really think that is really possible anyway. And yeah, pork roll sandwich allows me to tell you a little cultural history of New Jersey, the most hated state in America. This is the humble pork roll. It's one of those things where it's better to not know what it's made out of. It's like, the dirty water New York hot dog. But yeah, it's like the scraps of like slaughtered pigs with a bunch of fat, salt, and spices, and then it's smoked to perfection. Oh, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So for the pork roll sandwich, you will need a Kaiser roll. Have to have a Kaiser roll. These rolls were actually invented in what is now Austria in 1760. They're named after the Austrian Kaiser or King or Caesar Franz Joseph I. It's kind of funny, but during World War I, when the US got involved, these Kaiser rolls, they wanted to rename them because, the head of Germany was the Kaiser. And so they tried calling these Liberty rolls. It didn't catch on. It's kind of like, renaming French fries Freedom Fries or the French Kiss, the Star Spangled Smooch. People try and change the name. It never works out. But yeah, Kaiser rolls, absolute must for pork roll. Okay, and you also need processed white American cheese, a fried egg, some SP&K, salt, pepper, ketchup. And if you really want to get gluttonous, go with the Gutbuster sandwich. Add hash browns, bacon, sausage, and grilled onion, plus SPK. It's awful for you, and you feel awful before, during, and making it. But yeah, it's so good. So there's a New York Times article about how here in New Jersey, we bravely defeated the enemy that is radon poisoning. And it's from 1986, right when all this was going on. So yeah, I jest a little bit, but this is a huge problem still all over the world. Just in the US, the CDC estimates about 21,000 Americans die every year from lung cancer attributed to radon poisoning. And humans have been living in permanent structures for at least 13,000 years, probably a little bit longer. And this was only discovered in the 1980s. So you can imagine how many people have died in history from lung cancer induced by high levels of radon in permanent structures, right? Radon is not all bad news though. There are some amazing medical treatments that have been developed recently, very recently. It has a very interesting role in the past 3.5 billion years of evolutionary history. So radon is a member of the noble gases, that group of elements in row 18 that were particularly elusive in the search for new elements. By the end of the 1800s, almost all the elements had been discovered. All that was really left were the extremely radioactive ones, like technetium and astatine, and the noble gases. The first of the noble gases to be found was helium, and it was actually first discovered by the atomic spectral of lines on the sun during a total eclipse in 1868. And while the first radioactive elements were discovered before we even knew about radioactivity, like uranium was found way back in 1789 and thorium was found in 1828, radioactivity wasn't realized until 1896. So yeah, it's, pretty long history in between there. There's so much fat in pork roll, you don't need oil in the pan. Okay, pork roll comes from New Jersey. John Taylor invented it in 1856 in Trenton. As the old saying goes, Trenton makes and the world takes. It was originally called Taylor Prepared Ham. But later on in 1906, when the FDA came around, the government clamped down and was like, you can't call it that because ham is an actual cut of meat, and calling it that would be misleading. So, first, the reason it is pork roll and not Taylor ham is because it's not actually ham. Also, it's because other companies started making pork roll, like Case and Leffler's. Taylor Ham is the name of the company that invented pork roll, but pork roll is the name of the product, not Taylor ham. But yeah, this pork roll Taylor ham debate, it rages on. It's funny, in anthropology, we have this term called cultural relativism, where the culture you're raised in, it kind of automatically tends to make you think it is the right culture or it's superior to others. I try to be aware of that in all aspects of life, except when it comes to pork roll. I'm right and all of you people that say Taylor ham are wrong. So that sets the stage for radon getting found out. Like so many elements, we try to say, oh, this one guy discovered it, but no one in science goes it alone. Science is collaborative, it goes over generations, but sometimes, ego does get in the way, especially when you're talking about discovering a fundamental part of the universe. So fortunately, the discovery of radon wasn't quite so competitive, but it still went through many hands until someone could truly prove its existence. Again, it was a group effort here. Radioactivity had been discovered, and radium and polonium had been figured out. At this point, it's late 1800s, scientists all over the world are studying this new field of nuclear chemistry and figuring stuff out really quickly. So in Montreal in 1899, Ernest Rutherford and Robert Owens, working at McGill University, first observed some kind of radioactive gas emanating from thorium. Thorium, sweet name. Meanwhile, in Paris, Marie and Pierre Curie also detected radioactive gas coming off of radium. Then in Halle in Germany in 1900, Friedrich Ernst Dorn also recognized gas developing in a glass tube of radium. So these ended up all being different super radioactive isotopes of radon. What Rutherford and Owens had witnessed in thorium turned out to be radon-220, which has a half-life of a whopping 56 seconds. While the Curies in Paris and Ernst in Halle had detected was radium-222 with a half-life of 3.8 days. While they didn't know they were on the trail of discovering a new element, this was starting to build the research that would eventually culminate in the proof of number 86. It wasn't until 1904 that Sir William Ramsay in the UK determined what so many others had observed, that it could be a new element, part of the noble gas family, and it would be in fact the heaviest noble gas. The further down the periodic table you go, the heavier it gets, or rather the atomic weight. By the way, if you did not know when the whole radioactivity thing was first being figured out, radioactive materials were thought of as a potential medical cure-all. We know how now radiation treatments are absolutely useful, especially in eliminating cancerous cells. But in the early 1900s, people just went nuts with it. Radium especially was highly sought after and was added to toothpaste and jewelry and drinking water and facial creams to cigarettes. They just went nuts for the stuff. Honestly, it kind of reminds me of AI today. We have yet to see if Skynet will come out of it, but it does seem like we're being a little irresponsible with AI, just like we were with radium 120 years ago. This happens when a new, natural phenomenon is discovered. There's all sorts of grand assumptions and hopes of, what it can do for us, but, we just don't know until the real research goes in. And really, time just tells all. But when nuclear power was figured out in the 1950s, people thought that we were gonna have small nuclear powered batteries in every household giving us free clean energy. Imagine how crazy that would have been. We get hopeful when things are discovered. With the radioactive stuff, it got really weird though, and it still persists to this day. There are radon caves in Montana that tourists still flock to, where they just sit inside this radioactive trap and hope that it cures them of their arthritis or herpes or whatever, I don't know. But yeah, even though every single scientist said it's a bad idea, when people get it in their heads there is an easy, quick, miracle cure, sometimes it's too good to pass up. Even from the beginning of radioactive studies, people knew the stuff was dangerous. Pure radium will straight up burn through your skin. But radon gas is a little more of a slow, silent killer. Since radon gas is produced through the degradation of radium, thorium, and uranium isotopes, places that have those elements in the bedrock, they're gonna be particularly bad for you. And that's exactly where we first got the idea that radon was causing lung cancer. We needed a lot of uranium for the first atomic weapons during the 1940s, as recently illustrated in Oppenheimer, right? Uranium miners through the 1940s showed extremely high concentrations of lung cancer in the decades that passed, and this was recognized, and limits were put in place for the safety of the miners, which is something that we're not always really good with miners about. But yeah, this was known as professional workplace safety, and that wasn't really recognized until the 1980s when we really realized just what a problem it was for uranium miners. Anyone living above the bedrock with these radioactive isotopes degrading into radon gas was at risk. Radon is colorless, odorless, and inert, so it's kind of like the perfect radioactive gas to poison people slowly over a long period. Okay, so the pork roll is brown on each side, add a slice of white American cheese, then fry some eggs, and why not? Let's do a gut buster, for science. So you slice and fry some white onion, fry bacon, fry hash brown, fry sausage. Yeah, it's weird because, I guess you would call it an ethnographic study of where people in New Jersey say pork roll and where, other people say it wrong. Yeah, it's really just a North Jersey thing where Central and South Jersey say pork roll, which is correct, including Trenton, where pork roll was invented. Yeah, it's gotten really silly though. We have scratch-off lottery cards called The Great Debate that have pork roll, Taylor ham on it, but Yeah, it's a fun little cultural thing in New Jersey. So the story of like how radon poisoning was happening in the Northeast is absolutely crazy. So in eastern Pennsylvania in the 1980s, a guy named Stanley Watrous, he worked at the Limerick nuclear power plant while it was under construction. So the nuclear fuel wasn't even in there yet. Like they were building this place. But the radioactivity sensors, like they had already put in place, and Stanley was so radioactive from the radon in his house, he set off the sensors put in place to monitor nuclear leaks in the plant. So immediately they're like, why are you so radioactive, Stanley? And they looked at his house and it sat on this Triassic bedrock basin, really high in uranium, degrading into radon. So right after, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania started looking at other houses and found like radon just all over the place. And that's where the story comes to my hometown. This radon, it was really a panic. It took over like the country, and especially in the Northeast, it's really bad here. There was a cluster in a new development that they called the Clinton Knolls, which is like 2 miles that way. And the levels of radon that were being discovered were almost impossibly high. Like the radiation levels are measured in what are known as a curie. It's like a unit of measurement. Makes sense. She coined the term radioactivity. Also, it's known as a becquerel, the guy who originally discovered radioactivity. But a curie is basically what 1 gram of pure radium would emit, which is 37 billion disintegrations of radioactive material per second. It's a ridiculous amount of radiation. The acceptable amount of radon in houses is 4 picocuries. 1 picocurie is 1 trillionth of a curie. At Clinton Knolls, they were on average finding houses with more than 1,000 picocuries, which is equivalent to smoking 20 packs of cigarettes per day. Even worse, there were some houses with 3,000 picocuries, so comparable with smoking 60 packs per day. And this was the 1980s, so a lot of these people were probably smoking like 2 packs a day anyway, so not great. But it was really bad though. Like there was talk of abandoning this town altogether because of how radioactive everything was. The reason it was so bad in this area though is because of the underlying uranium in the Triassic, Jurassic rocks that underlie this area. So, maybe it's like Revenge of the Dinosaurs, I don't know. But yeah, we almost got Jurassic kicked by the geology of the local area. That uranium decomposes into radon gas, and because radon gas is so heavy, it just sits in people's basements and actually can get all the way up to the 2nd floor in houses. But thankfully there was a solution, and it was a pretty easy fix. One of the residents of the Clinton Knolls over here was a chemist and took some crash courses in like radon mitigation and designed some ventilation with the EPA and started figuring out, a solution. Eventually they created venting pipes through the basement and into gravel underneath where the radon gas was coming in, and pumped it through the ceiling into the air above where it would just dissipate. So within a year or so, the readings of the Clinton Knolls were down to the 4 picocuries per house within the safe zone that the EPA determined. Not that all radon is bad though. Radon itself degrades into radioactive polonium and alpha particles that are used in cancer treatments. Originally, radon gas was captured in glass tubes and implanted into cancerous tumors, killing off cancerous cells. That was like a long time ago. Thankfully, we've come a far way with chemotherapy treatments. So remember when, I was talking about the radon caves in Montana? Well, I read some studies about radon gas inhalation to treat cancers, and while they are small sample groups, it did give me reason to think about the radon caves a little bit more. Like, the studies are very controlled, and they know the exact amount of radon being delivered to patients when they're doing these studies. So if you're gonna treat yourself with radon, you really should know the amount of radon you're receiving is consistent and not, however much just happens to be in a cave the one day that you visit. So, it's still interesting to think about. Like, you come to this conclusion all the time with the elements though. Like, what can harm you can also cure you given the right circumstance. Sulfur was used as mustard gas in World War I and later found out to kill white blood cells in the first chemotherapy treatments. Sodium blows up on contact with water. Chlorine is a poison gas. Together it makes table salt. The cause and solution to all life's problems are found within the periodic table. Homer Simpson. No, that's not good. Okay, on to evolution. Background radiation has always been around on Earth. Since the Earth formed, that background radiation has been influencing life on Earth in ways we are just now starting to understand. Low background radiation has been influencing cell mutation, which is one of the forces that create genetic variation. All living things on Earth are exposed to background radiation. And we are at a point now where we can do experiments to see exactly how different rates of radiation causes different effects on organisms. So how life got to be the way it is on Earth, we may never truly understand. But background radiation absolutely played some part in it. And we are, the better for figuring that out. So overall, radon causes cancer, cures cancer, has influenced evolutionary processes, and indirectly brought us the greatest breakfast sandwich of all time, the pork roll sandwich, not Taylor ham. No such thing as Taylor ham. The best sandwiches fall apart when you eat them, right? Everyone knows that. This is fantastic. Pork roll, all the way. Thanks. See you next time.